Hey guys, Melted Cat here, and I want to talk about the Pantheon system. Now, when the Pantheon system was first introduced, I was quite vocal about how I was worried about it. Since we've had some chance to mess around with it in the beta, my concerns have not improved. So, if you're unaware of the Pantheon system, how does it work? As you are leveling from Act 6 onwards, you will encounter these major and minor bosses. When you kill them, you absorb their soul, and you get the option of a buff. You can have one minor, which are displayed at the bottom here, and one major. As you can see, you unlock the main ability at the top, and the three lower ones, which are greyed out. Those you unlock by killing the relevant boss in the mapping system. Now, there is a rare item which drops, which is what you use. It's like the soul device, and you put it into the map, right? So, for example, to capture Glace, you run the, I believe it's Beach is the one that Glace is the boss of. You'd run a beach map with the soul device put into the map, and then you get like a super buffed boss. You kill a super buff boss, you get a soul, and then you upgrade the next thing. So you can fully upgrade these. Mages get 3 upgrades, minors get 1 upgrade, and that's kind of how it works. Now, from what we've seen, they're fairly rare. We don't know how accessible they'll be in the end game, because mapping on the beta is really awkward. Most people are using themselves, not selling them on, etc. But basically, you have the core version and then the buffed up version. Now, my main initial concern with Pantheon would be it would either be so insignificant that it wouldn't serve a purpose, or it would be so powerful it would just be Ascendancy 2.0. How does that hold up? Currently, Pantheon feels, I think the word is uninspired. There are some interesting options there. However, outside of like 1 or 2 genuinely interesting options, they're mostly extremely bland and only good for niche builds, and the builds they are good for, they're insanely powerful for. So it's kind of like for 1 or 2 builds, you've got Ascendancy 2.0. For the vast majority, there's nothing really going on. So I'm going to very quickly just like scroll through the list and go through it. Now, before I go through that, there's one other issue with it. You can change these for free at any point, as long as you're in town. The base like development idea from interviews I've seen with GGG is it's kind of like they all offer these slight niche advantages, and you're swapping them on the fly as you need to go. Now, this is a neat little idea, but if you fully achieve that idea of like there's small little bonuses that you're changing for each level of content that you're doing, the best case scenario is you're adding micromanagement. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the powers are so insignificant, is while they like the idea of having these powers that you swap on the fly, they don't want them to be so attractive that you're then like doing another level of map micromanagement, especially with all the like feedback of Legacy League being too much micromanagement. The last thing you want is to be like, oh, there's this mod on the map, better swap, because then it's like you're sorting through your maps once, and then you're sorting through them like 3 more times. Like, let's put all the chain maps together, so I have the anti-chain one for this one, let's then swap to this one for this one, and so on and so forth. So let's just break through it. So as you've seen here, you cannot be frozen if you've been frozen recently, you cannot be stunned if you've been stunned recently. This is basically the like decent major that every build will use. So it's again 1 major, 1 minor. Unless you're Righteous Fire, you're just using this because this is actually helpful. This is what the vast majority will use and will never change out of. The upgraded things of reduced chill effect, cool. Reduced cold damage taken, very nice. Stun block recovery, whatever, right? Not being stun locked is nice. The freeze removal one is meaningless because you still need your freeze removal. So the only thing which this really says is you cannot be stun locked. And then when it's upgraded, reduced cold damage taken, which is rather meaningful. Okay, next one. Reduced damage taken over time. This isn't going to be that impactful for Blood Rage builds. This won't be the difference being able to like skimp out 1% life regen. This is really only nice for Righteous Fire builds. And then reduced bleeding damage taken while moving. It's nice for Righteous Fire builds in the fact that it gives you a little bit more like brain time to go, oh, I'm bleeding. But most builds have bleed removal up 100% of the time. So really not that meaningful. The Chaos one, that's actually pretty nice. With the current meta looking like everyone's going to be doing life-based Righteous Fire, one of the things which used to be genuinely quite scary is the ED Rogue Exile, random Chaos Zombies. Having the extra resistance that is pretty nice for those RF builds. Cool. Soul of Solaris. Bismuth if there is only one enemy nearby. Most bosses have adds up half of the fight or for large portions of the fight. Most bosses aren't pure physical. The bosses which are pure physical, 6% Bismuth isn't going to be what saves you. So, 10% chance to take 50% less damage from area hits. What were they thinking? Most things are area hits. Nearly everything is an area hit. So this is a 10% chance to take 50% less damage on a random slam. So there's a 10% chance you won't get one shot if you face tank slams. You're not going to start face tanking slams because of this. So it just means that when you do get clipped and you die, if you have this active, you just rage quit. For softcore, sure, but softcore players aren't really going to take this. For hardcore, it just makes you rage quit completely. The reduced LE damage taken if you haven't been hit recently, that's actually pretty nice. This will affect Reflect. Reflect doesn't count as a hit, so this is 5% reduced elemental reflects taken if you have been hit recently. Pretty decent. Take no extra damage from critical strikes if you've taken a critical strike recently. Awkward, someone in chat was trying to convince me that on extra crit maps this would be good. My main concern is with most of these things that if you've taken X hit recently, if you've taken a hit in the last 4 seconds, you get X. Most builds one-shot the entire screen. If you're an evasion build, you just never get hit. Even if you're not an evasion build, you just one-shot everything. The things which hit you are the stuff which kill you. So it's one of those things that was like, oh, you're doing this scary boss, you can let him tap you like once and then tap you again, but if he taps you like 2 or 3 times in a 4-second window, you just die. So, yeah. Reduced chance to avoid ailments, most things have ailment removal. Right. Basically, nothing that inspired so far. Let's continue. Fizz damage reduction for each nearby enemy, movement speed for each nearby enemy. Having a little movement speed boost every now and again is pretty nice. This will be really good for something like Cyclone. Again, very nice for niche examples. Other than that, not that great. Most range builds don't want to get that close to enemies. So cool. Chance to avoid projectile damage, 10% chance. Could be decent, but not awe-inspiring. 5% chance to dodge attack styles if you've been hit recently. Nice little buffer, but again, nothing that awe-inspiring. Chance to avoid projectiles that have chained. This seems great for like summoners, like the SRS summoners, the guys who've died to the random LA Exile. You're still going to want to avoid that, right? This is basically, it's only nice for people who run a golem. It means you're less likely to kill yourself to your golem if you leave your golem up on a chain map. For actual like full party summoners, animate weapons, SRS, it's still going to be scary. It's still going to completely clear out all of your minions. It's just you're going to have a chance. So this doesn't apply to your minions, right? So your minions are still afraid of the chain map. So you're probably still not going to want to run chain maps with those builds. So it only helps you against the random exile half of the time. Incredibly niche, right? Reduced fire damage taken while moving into the miners. Really nice righteous fire. 25% chance for cold damage and lightning damage to be taken as fire damage when hit. It's almost as if they designed this around a particular build which would have a lot of fire resistance. Incredibly niche, nothing that interesting. Chance to evade attacks if you've taken a savage hit recently. Again, most builds aren't being hit rapidly. The builds which are being hit rapidly are the face tank builds. The face tank builds generally have some form of mitigation, so they're not taking massive hits. They either have loads of Elimit, loads of Fizzmit, or they have loads of like block and dodge. If they're having loads of block and dodge, they're not taking loads of rapid hits. 1% Fizz damage reduction for each hit you've taken recently. These have negative synergy. This wants you to get rapidly hit. This wants you to not get rapidly hit. Enemies that have hit you with an attack have 10% reduced attack speed. Pretty meaningful debuff, has negative synergy with itself. Doesn't quite know what it's doing. Kind of nice, kind of niche, but it's just like you pass it away. If this was, for example, in World of Warcraft, these would be like little minor nodes that you would have to take in order to get to something interesting. You wouldn't ever be excited about picking this up, right? You're not hype to pick this up. It's not that interesting of a system. 20% reduced reflect damage taken. Seems great, but you now have Scion offering less reflect, you have Elementalist offering less reflect, Slayer offering less reflect damage on the tree, Sibyl's Ring, and then it has increased cold damage built into it if you've been hit recently. So it's nice, but now cold damage is more scary. Why does this need to have a downside? None of the others have a downside. This is only 20% reduced reflects taken, which isn't that great. Why does it have to have a downside to it? Chance to reflect, chill, and freeze. Most builds are immune to chill and freeze. I don't know if you can reflect to it while you're immune to it, but the upgrade basically does nothing here. How does this match up with this, which is a really powerful upgrade? Doesn't really make much sense. I don't know what that one does. While stationary, gain Physmit. Very nice for Scorching Ray. Trash for every other build, because no builds want to stand still. If you're standing still against a boss, most bosses don't do pure fizz. The bosses which do pure fizz, you don't want to be standing still to, because they do really big scary damage. So the bosses this is helpful against, you just don't want to get hit by. So, the increased life regen, again, really nice at Scorching Ray, but see previous thing. You're still going to want to be dodging the attacks. The builds which can face tank the pure fizz bosses don't need extra Physmit because they can already face tank, right? Like, it doesn't enable something you couldn't do already. None of these really enable new things. They just supplement things that the build was already good at. For example, the less fire damage taken on a build which was already built around not taking fire damage. Chance to avoid bleed. 30% chance to avoid stacks of corrupting blood. You still need to have bleed removal. Because you still need to have bleed removal on your flask or an item which makes you immune to bleeds like Death's Door, this does nothing. So, it does nothing. Reduced bleed effect on you, reduced maim. What is this, PvP? No. Even if this is PvP, most PvP is low-level PvP. Low-level PvP doesn't have access to Pantheon. So, yes, I know the shield charge mobs can apply maim to you. I know there are some mobs which can apply bleed. Most of the time, you just don't get hit. And it's just like, what is this for? There are more helpful little minor ones than that. This is the one which is actually interesting. This is like the kind of things they should be, right? So Life Flask gain 3 charges every 3 seconds if you haven't used a Life Flask recently. For example, you're a Volpact build. You encounter a trial in a map. Let me quickly go back to my hoe, swap to this, so that if I get caught because my build has no regen, I can regen my flask. This is actually really nice. Or if it's the start of the league and you're doing a boss under geared, like Ziz recently used this to great effect in a Vinktars map, you can like hide in a little corner of the map on the boss, recharge your flasks. Really nice, has a niche use for any life build. But this is like the most interesting of all the minor nodes, and it's only helpful for life. So if you're not a life build, you don't have any interesting minor nodes. 6% increased life recovery for flask with no life. This is something which is like kind of meaningful. If you're using this, this means you use life flasks, right? You're only going to use this minor node if you use life flasks. Have increased life recovery on your life flask while no life makes sense. This is a clear upgrade worth chasing. Unlike this, right? So, yeah. Basically, it's a system which doesn't want to be too powerful because the developers don't want to give too much power when people are already complaining about too much power creep. At the same time, it's still trying to be exciting, so you have very slight niche examples of extreme power, like, for example, Righteous Fire, where taking 10% less fire damage is pretty significant when it also means that you take less chaos damage, less bleed damage. It's just, it's kind of all over the place. Basically, in most cases, it's going to be complete set and forget, and you never really change it except for once or twice. And most builds will, once they reach their like power spike, they completely ignore it. Pantheon is an awkward system, and it's one of those things of, I feel like GGG is going to spend a lot of time trying to make these interesting, and it's just like a potential like development sink. I would have much rather, personally, if the time that was spent developing Pantheon was spent maybe messing around with some of the Ascendancies. There's still weird Ascendancy balance. Deadeye could do with some love. Saboteur could do with some love. There are plenty of others which could do with some tweaking. I don't want to speak for everyone, but personally, it's like the time which should be spent to make Pantheon a more interesting system, because currently, if it went live as is, it'd be a bit of a, you know, fail in my part. Could have been better spent on other things. One positive I will say from it, if Pantheon ever does become a very successful system people are chasing, it does open up a new avenue of boss selling, where people then start selling bosses for certain Atlas things. Oh, and one other final thing, the Atlas is already a pretty messed up system. In the case of where you do really want one particular boss thing, you need to mess up your Atlas to kill the particular boss. So, even more reason to avoid Pantheon is you will have to mess with your Atlas to get it all fully unlocked. But yeah, sorry for the really negative videos. Despite what people think, I don't actually like being super negative, but I'll make these videos when I feel like there's a system which needs some love. And yeah, this is one of them. What do you guys think about Pantheon? Do you like it as is? If you would change it, what changes would you make? I'm Tarke. It's too hot in the UK right now. Have a good day. Bye-bye.